Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome to another Mortal Kombat video. Now today I wanted to talk about a topic that's kind of been in my mind for a while, ever since I made the Armageddon video last week, and that is, will we ever actually see the One Being? Now some of you are probably extremely unfamiliar with who the One Being is, as the One Being himself has not had an actual physical reveal within the main Mortal Kombat canon. There's been little hints there, like in Shinnok's ending in MKX, and Onaga's ending in the original timeline, but we never actually see who this individual is. The closest we actually get to ever seeing what the One Being is during the beginning sequence of MK9, where Shao Kahn has defeated Blaze, absorbed his power, and begins to merge all of the realms. But how does this exactly play into who the One Being is? Well, for the purpose of getting you all a little bit more familiar with what exactly is the One Being is an ancient deity that existed at the very beginning of time, before the birth of the Elder Gods and creation of the realms. That's just how old he is. Now the One Being himself didn't really become active up until the Elder Gods were born. I say that because nothing else existed around him before that. Now when the Elder Gods were created, the One Being would set his eyes on these fellow deities, but not see them as friends, but as food. He would prey on the Elder Gods and use their essence as sustenance. He in many ways was a monster, and with his somewhat limitless power, he was able to kill and consume many of the Elder Gods. Knowing that they couldn't beat the One Being out of sheer power, they would create 6 different Comedo Goos that would split the One Being's power and body. So the Elder Gods were successful in defeating the One Being by separating his life force. Now here's where things actually get kind of interesting, as the 6 parts of the One Being that was split up actually became a different realm, and thus in time, life would begin to flourish in each of the different realms, with some being peaceful and some looking like this. Because although we haven't seen the One Being in person, his defeat most certainly paved way for a very interesting future. Now despite being split into different pieces, the One Being isn't exactly down and out of the equation just yet. As you see, his somewhat subconsciousness that exists in the realms actually allows him to somewhat influence individuals and bend and tempt them into merging the realms together. He's done this to the likes of Onaga and Shao Kahn, as he does see them as vessels he can actually live through. So yes, behind the curtains, the One Being is actually the one that's pulling the strings. No pun intended. But he has such a massive influence over the universe, it'd be hard to ignore the possible threat that he does pose. Can the One Being return? Well, it's actually something that's indeed in the realm of possibility. Now traditionally, the only way you could actually merge realms together was by one realm invading another by defeating them in 10 consecutive Mortal Kombat tournaments. A good example of this is when Shao Kahn did it to Edenia and invaded Edenia with Outworld, thus merging it with his own. But this isn't actually the only option. During the 3D era of games, Shao Kahn's old master Onaga would resurface, and much like his protege, had his heart set on merging the realms, except he wouldn't do this via Mortal Kombat tournament. Yet the 6 Comedo Goos acquired for him by Shigenko, and thus would merge them all together to once again reunite the One Being, in his eyes giving him the ultimate power. Now of course that was his plan, but it did not come to fruition, as he would be defeated by Shigenko. But here are where things get kind of interesting, since we are on the topic of Comedo Goos. In the new rebooted timeline, the Comedo Goos are no longer just amulets. They are instead magical daggers that were used to pierce the One Being before separating him, so they don't quite take on the appearance of their other timeline counterpart. And on top of this, they seemingly have blood magic related properties, which is something we didn't see from the original timeline, as in the new timeline the Comedo Goos do change, and blood magic itself actually derives from the One Being's blood, which wasn't an idea that was introduced in the original timeline. Now the last and final way you can actually merge the realms is by defeating Blaze and acquiring his power, which seemingly does in turn make you strong enough to merge the realms all at once. At least that's what I get from the beginning of Mortal Kombat 9, when Shao Kahn somewhat ends the original timeline. So now that we've talked about all of these factors, which one of these are actually kind of viable to happen in the new timeline? Well, when it comes to talking about Mortal Kombat tournaments, the Mortal Kombat games themselves actually have a tendency to stray away from the tournaments. Everything from the 4th game onwards kind of did its own thing without following the tournament format. So I don't think the chances of it doing the whole tournament thing is very possible in the new rebooted timeline, but it is indeed a possibility and it's actually kind of viable to happen. As for the Comedo Goos, it's very hard for me to say, because as I've mentioned, they've changed so much about the Comedo Goos that they aren't really the same Comedo Goos from the original timeline. They are very different. So if they carry new and different properties that we don't yet understand, then yes, the one being can come back, I guess, in that way, but there aren't enough details on it to go by, so I'm going to have to say no for now. In terms of Armageddon, this event kind of seems set in stone, and if Blaze is still an existent force in this universe, then this is indeed something that's very viable. Of course, it all does depend on who's able to defeat Blaze and acquire his power, as this may lead to the somewhat end of this universe. But of course, with a lot of the alterations and different takes in this new timeline, we know that the games will be going in a very different direction. Now, one thing that does interest me is how they'll actually use the One Being as a character, because yes, he has influenced people and used them as vessels on numerous different occasions, but I want to see whether or not they'll give him an actual physical form, even if it is incomplete because the realms aren't merged together. Because we've heard a lot of talk about the One Being for such a long amount of time. It'd feel only right if he was given some actual physical form soon, because let's face it, the Elder Gods are kind of dicks, and I feel like someone like the One Being would put them in their place. But of course, the One Being itself seemingly having limitless power would be a very OP character to write, which is why I say I'd be quite interested to see a physical yet incomplete form of him. It'd actually give the One Being a face and kind of set him up as a major antagonist properly down the line and as a future boss, which yes, is something I can see. So the chances of the One Being actually returning is indeed extremely high. It's always a viable idea because he's constantly influencing people to merge the realms, but whether or not he'll get his own actual physical body is something we do have to wait and see, but I do have my fingers crossed. But anyway guys, this more or less does wrap up the video. I do hope you enjoyed it and have learned more, as the One Being is kind of obscure in the Mortal Kombat universe and we don't really have too much information to go by on him. So hopefully you all now have a rough idea of who / what the One Being actually is. But yeah, that more or less does wrap up the video. I do want to say, also remember there's E3 coming over the next week, so a bunch of videos will come out that are fighting game related. So please do keep an eye out for that guys. Now before it wraps up, if possible, let's try getting it to about 500 likes. It's a great way of helping this channel since YouTube's ad system is broken as hell. So by giving it a thumbs up, it helps out a ton. And if you want to go the extra step, we also have a Patreon set up, and a link for it will be down in the description below. Anyway guys, as always, please comment, like, subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care, and I'll see you all next time.